So our next guest probably does not need much introduction for many of you, but this is Dan Buettner, National Geographic Explorer, Emmy Award-winning producer, and multiple best-selling author. He is somebody that I have admired for a very, very long time, and he came up and has done so much research around the world with what people eat and longevity and how people's behavior affects their longevity. And he coined the term, the blue zones, somewhere back in the early 2000s. I know I've been personally talking about them since 2010, so quite a long time. And what we do know is that the blue zones are areas where people are more likely to live to over 100. He also created the Blue Zones Company, but more importantly, and he's implemented some of these changes to towns in the United States where there's been a huge change in the health of the population that live there. But more recently, Dan's Netflix series, Live to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones, received 6 Emmy nominations and won 3. So with that in mind, we're going to watch a very short video on the Blue Zones, if you'd like to play it.
What's the best tea to drink on a daily basis?
Wine.
I like the way you roll. I have found that most of what people think lead to a long, healthy life is misguided or just plain wrong. What if we could reverse engineer longevity? I spent the last 20 years trying to do just that. Is it okay if I... Instead of looking for answers in test tubes, I found 5 places around the world called blue zones where people are living to 100 at the highest rates in the world. What is the secret to living a long time?
Community. If you're depressed, you're not going to live very long.
So the steepness for us is very important. Just by walking, you have an additional energy expenditure.
Do we want to be dormant, or do we want to serve humanity?
These people live to 100 at the highest rates in the world. And these secrets could help every one of us to get every good year we can get out of this body of ours. That is the promise of Blue Zones.
So with no further ado, allow me to welcome Dan Buettner to the stage.
Thank you very much. What a thrill. You know, I get to speak at a lot of conferences, and I can honestly say I can't think of another organization or room full of people that authentically preserve people's health than this one right here. So give yourself a round of applause, please. So I'm going to talk about the world's longest lived people and the lessons they teach us. And I really am. If I'm successful today, I'm going to do 2 things. Number one, I'm going to convince you that most of what you think leads to healthy longevity is indeed misguided, or largely wrong. But number 2, I'm going to show you a model that's actually worked at preserving health in the hopes that maybe it'll get some traction here in the UK. But first, I want to start with you. I'm a big believer that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So we're going to start today by calculating how long each and every one of you is going to live. And in order to do that, I need to ask you 8 questions. And your job is to raise your hand if the question pertains to you. All right? Are you guys game? Okay, they start really easy and they get hard. First question, raise your hand if you sleep at least 7 hours most nights. At least 7 hours. Whoa, there we go. Well-rested group. We're now clubbing last night. Raise your hand if you move at least 45 minutes most days of the week. And it could be in the gym, but it could just be walking. All right, almost all of you. Raise your hand if you eat at least 3 servings of vegetables and 3 servings of fruits or grains every day. And French fries and ketchup do not count. All right? I know I'm among healthy people. Raise your hand if you have not had unprotected sex with a stranger. I said not. I'm going to hang out with you guys tonight. These, by the way, are real questions. All right, raise your hand if you have 3 friends that meet the following criteria. Number 1, you can have a meaningful conversation with them. Number 2, you can count on them on a bad day. And number 3, you actually like them. So at least 3. There we go, another tsunami. That's actually the question the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation uses to assess loneliness. So it's a real question. Raise your hand if you have not smoked in the last 5 years. Not smoked in the last 5 years. And we're talking tobacco. Okay, almost all of you. Raise your hand if you think you're of normal weight. I'm not going to get into calculations, you know, or you can know it in your head and raise it and lie if you want, but just, okay. Again, most of you. And probably the most important question here, I know I shouldn't be framing it ahead of time, but raise your hand if you think you have the capacity and the desire to live to be at least age 90. Capacity, there we go. Yeah, but a few hands down over here. That question is actually most predictive of actually making it to 90 because only you know best how you've treated your body, you know how you feel today, and you kind of know how you intend to behave going forward. So it's actually a very predictive, but with all 8 of them combined, I can get pretty close, within about 10 or 15%. The assumption is your average age is about 40, and I'm looking around, I can tell you guys are a lot younger than that. But I can get pretty close to the best life expectancy calculators. If you raise your hand twice and you're a man, life expectancy is 71, and if you're a woman, it's 75. A man, you're 75. You'll make it to 75. If you raise your hand 5 times and you're a man, life expectancy is 83, and if you're a woman, it's 87. And if you raise your hand at least 7 times and you're a man, life expectancy is 92, and if you're a woman, it's 96. Did anybody raise their hand all 8 times? Anybody raise their hand all 8 times? Oh my God. Could you guys please stand up? Can we give them a huge round of applause? Oh my God, I've never seen this many people stand up. You guys are all dismissed to the lobby. We have longevity martinis for you. The rest of you can stay. All right, we're going to have some fun here. I'm going to try to just very quickly give an overview of blue zones, say a number of things that weren't said in the documentary. So if you see in the documentary, it won't be too redundant. But you know, blue zones begins with the widely held assumption that only about 20% of how long we live collectively is dictated by our genes. The other 80% is something else. So instead of looking for an answer in a test tube or some doctor's theory or some genetic code, we actually went out and found populations and, in a sense, reverse engineered longevity. And we found 5 original blue zones, and these are areas where middle-age mortality is at the lowest and or they have the highest centenarian. Actually, we count people 90 or over, but it's easier for people to think of 100-year-olds, but it's the highest concentration of people 90 or over the past 150 years. And I got grants from the National Institutes on Aging and from National Geographic, largely because we came up with an age verification process. We worked with real career demographers. We parsed through worldwide census data, and then when we got a strong signal, we sent our teams in to examine the National Register. Birth records, by the way, are all entered sequentially, so it's very hard to lie about a birth. And then we do the same thing with death records. Again, they're put in sequentially. We cross-reference them to actual death certificates, and if we can't find a death certificate, what do? We go knock on we go to the cemetery, and if they're there, we have a third point of verification. But if they're not in the cemetery, we go to their house. And if they're serving us tea, we're pretty sure they're alive. But this process has yielded about a dozen peer-reviewed scientific studies. So in the scientific community, there's no ambiguity here. These are the longest lived known populations in the world. And I believe they have something to teach us. I recruited a world-class team of experts to help me come up with a methodology, then to find the correlations. I'll warn you ahead of time, there's nothing causative about my work. I cannot say for sure that anything A causes B in any case, but I can tell you the correlation repeats itself in 5 disparate parts of the world. So after doing a thorough review of the literature, interviewing about 105 of the world's top longevity experts, and then we came up with an instrument an interview instrument where I personally talked to about 400 centenarians in all the blue zones. And the idea of this questionnaire was to understand what people have done most of their life. If you want to know what a centenarian did to live to be 100, you have to know what she was doing as a little girl and at middle age and lately. You can't just ask them, what they are eating, what they ate for breakfast, like most journalists do. It took a lot of work. I've been working on this for over 20 years now, and the work continues. I can tell you more about that later. But it yields a pretty strong result. No matter where we go in the world and there's long-lived people, we see the same things happening over and over and over again. There are 9 of them, and then an organizing principle. And that's the part that I think surprises most people, especially in the public health world. But I'm going to tell you what those things are. But first, because I have the benefit of National Geographic photography, I thought I'd first quickly take you to each of the blue zones to give you an idea for what it's like to live in a longevity hotspot. So we found our first blue zone, in fact, the original blue zone. It was actually identified by Gianni Pes and Michel Poulon. Is about 200 kilometers off the coast of Italy on the island of Sardinia. Not the entire island, just a cluster of about 5 villages, about 70,000 people, where you have the highest concentration of male centenarians in the world. And perhaps more remarkable, it's about 11 times more than a similar population in the United States. So it's 2 or 3 standard deviations from the norm. But I think what's most important about this Sardinian blue zone, their life expectancy at age 60 is about 10 years more than it is here in Great Britain. So, that's the value proposition is about that. These are humans with a melting pot of genes. They don't have any genetic advantage over you or me or people in the United States or our neighbors. Yet they're living a long time. So these surveys sort of got at what people have done or what are the characteristics of their lives. And between Gianni and I, we actually interviewed about 300 centenarians. Most of them were men. And we found that I'm going to tell you in reverse order, the third biggest predictor of reaching age 100 was not red wine, as I hoped. It was how steep their village is. The steeper the village, the better chance of making it to 100. You can kind of see why if you're doing this a dozen times every single day. Second biggest predictor, how many daughters you had. Now, we don't know if that's because daughters tend to take care of their aging parents, their aging fathers, or if it's because if you can survive 5 adolescent girls making it to 100, it's no problem. But nevertheless, daughters seem to be good for us. But the biggest predictor was the profession. And the farmers in Sardinia seemed to do no better than their Italian counterparts. It was the shepherds. So we embedded with the shepherds to see if we could get some clues. And we noticed these guys wake up late. They're not particularly hardworking. None of them go to the gym or pump iron. But they do walk. They walk, we figure, between 6 and 8 kilometers every single day. Many parts of the year they have to go out for several days, and they developed a diet that they could take on the road without refrigeration. They came up with a whole grain bread, unleavened, called carta de musica. And then until about 1965, their second biggest source of calories came from their own sheep's cheese. Grass-fed, so it's high in omega-3s. They came up with a type of wine called Cananal, which would grow at altitude with the harsh sunshine. We had to test it. There's actually the top wine expert in the world is right here from London. His name is Roger Corder. But he tested the samples worldwide we collected, and he found that this Cananal had the highest levels of polyphenols, including resveratrol, of any known wine in the world. And this wine is almost always homemade. Nothing like dirty boots to add terroir. And it's consumed in small amounts over the course of the day, probably 2 to 3 glasses a day, almost always with a meal or with friends, almost never in isolation. When they're at home, they're eating a variant of the Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean diet actually shows up very different where you are in the Mediterranean, whether you're in, Italy or France or Spain or Northern Africa. But this variant is very high in fava beans, interestingly, and very high in pasta. Another counterintuitive. They do eat some meat, about 10 kilos a year, about 5 times per month. Never cows. Cows didn't do very well at altitude and rocky, craggy. A little bit of chicken. Pork was the celebratory. And I always hesitate because I tell, I say people ate pork in the blue zone. They run out and they, eat bacon and pork chops and so forth. No. The average American eats about 220 or 110 kilos of meat a year. Here we're eating about 1/11 as much. So it's a celebratory food here. More important than diet and exercise. And we're kind of obsessed with diet and exercise. But it's only one of the, I would argue, 5 of the main legs of what actually creates and preserves health. Here they possess a fanatic zeal for the family. It has a little bit to do with their history. They were pushed up in the highlands by the Phoenicians and the Romans before Christ, and they've sort of incubated their own lifestyle of longevity. Unlike the United States, where we're scared to death that older people are going to bankrupt Medicare or Social Security, here older people are treasures. You would shame your family if you put your aging parent in a retirement home. Instead, they're kept in the home where their talents and their wisdom are harnessed. Not just for agriculture, or women are always the keepers of the food tradition, and we know food does have a really important role in longevity here, and it's the grandmas that continue to bring that forward. But also you talk about resilience, you talk about childcare, you talk about helping raise children. Turns out that indeed families that have a grandmother benefit for something called the grandmother effect. And it shows up in many cultures around the world. Having a grandmother at home, or even near home in some cultures, favors the mortality and the rates of disease of the children. So it sets up this beautiful virtuous circle. Older people stay more engaged, less loneliness. Younger people are taken care of better and benefit from more wisdom. On the other side of the planet, we found the longest lived women, Okinawa, Japan. In a cohort of women 60 or over, we found about 30 times more centenarians than you would in the United States. A part of it is their diet. And anybody want to take a guess the #1 source of calories in the Okinawan diet before about 1980? Rice, good guess, but no. Seaweed, no. That's right, purple sweet potato. About 70% of all their calories. Why? Because they love purple sweet potato. Older people are kind of sick of it. But purple sweet potato survived typhoons. It was a rich source of calories, shelf-stable, and it happens to be very nutritious. About 150% of the same antioxidants you find in blueberries are in purple sweet potatoes, plus a lot of high in complex carbohydrates, even protein. Their main source of protein, though, although they did eat a little pork, was tofu, about 8 times more tofu than we eat. But again, more important than diet and their physical activity, I would argue, is the way they set up their communities. In America, we live in a place where there's no guarantee that we're going to have somebody who cares about us. But in Okinawa, at a very young age, parents put their children in something called a moai, a committed social circle. And this pod of people, 4 or 5 people, travel through life together. And the reason I show this picture here is that these 5 girls have belonged to the same moai for 97 years. Their average age is 102. They still get together every night, drink sake, gossip, argue about who that hot guy liked best back in 1942. But they really look after each other. I sat with them for 2 nights, and the second night, one didn't show up. The other 4 put their kimono on, hobbled across the village, and they went and checked on her friend. And for me, that was just a very visual manifestation of care. If that 102-year-old lady had fallen down and broken her hip or hit her head, she might have had hours to live. As it turns out, she just overslept her nap, but never mind, you get the point. No retirement in the Okinawan dialect. Think about that. Retirement is a completely manufactured idea. It's imported from Germany to mostly for actuarial table purposes for Social Security. And it's this artificial punctuation between our useful life and our life of repose. Our useful life and, in many cases, our useless life. That's what we're essentially told without using words. Okinawa, instead of retirement, they have a word ikigai, which roughly means the reason for which I wake up in the morning. The people I interview all had an immediate answer for that question. In some cases, it was karate. In some cases, they continue to fish for the family. The spiritual leader here, Kamada-san, her ikigai was her great-great-great-granddaughter. These two girls are separated in age by 101.5 years. And when I asked her what it felt like to hold a descendant more than a century younger than her, she put her head back and said, "It feels like leaping into heaven." Actually kind of made me look forward to getting old. So my editor at National Geographic, Peter Miller, old school editor, he said, I have to find America's Blue Zone. And we actually found it in a very unusual place, about 120 kilometers down the San Bernardino Freeway, southeast of Los Angeles. We got off the exit. First thing we saw, remember, I'd just been at exotic Okinawa and Sardinia. We get off the exit, and first thing we see is a Del Taco and a Wiener Hut. And I'm going, what? Well, it turns out that Loma Linda, California has the highest concentration of Seventh-day Adventist. We just heard a presentation here that had a lot of DASH diet sort of influence. That comes from an Adventist by the name of Hans Deal. And Adventists, it turns out, have been long-time evangelists for health. And in fact, they've asserted they're the healthiest people for about 150 years. And our NHS, National Institutes on Health, actually funded a study to sort of test out that theory. So it's 103,000 Americans followed for 30 years, so it's gold standard epidemiology. In the United States right now, life expectancy for women is about 80. For Adventist women, they're living 9 years longer, adherent Adventists, and for men, the difference is even more stark. So think about this for a moment. This isn't exotic people living far away in some secret. These are people who live next to the Wiener Hut off the freeway, and somehow they're living a decade longer. Well, that's something we ought to be paying attention to. So we embedded, my team and I, probably spent 6 weeks with the Adventist. And these are just observations. Some of it's data back, but first of all, they take their Sabbath very seriously. From sunset on Friday until sunset on Saturday, no matter how busy they are, no matter what work's telling them to do, no matter what the social calendar is demanding, no matter where the kids need to be driven, they stop everything. And for 24 hours, they have what they call a sanctuary in time, sort of a reboot. We hear a lot about stress and our minds are too distracted. For this 24 hours at night, the TV stays off. They focus on their family Friday night. Saturday morning, they have the religious services, which tend to last almost all morning. Saturday noon, they have potlucks, and they're a lot like Moais. People get together with their friends, and they sit down, and they share lunch together, rebuild these social ties. Saturday afternoon, hardwired right in their religion, is a nature walk, the definition of which has evolved, but nevertheless, Saturday afternoon is reserved to get out. It's not like, the employer wellness week or whatever, where it may or may not happen, and then it's sort of, you wellness for a week, and then a month later, you're back to doing exactly what you were doing before. No, this happens every single week for decades or a lifetime. They get their diet directly from the Bible. I will admit up front, I was not a big Bible reader before this story, but I read it very carefully. And indeed, if you go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 24, God lays out the diet for the Garden of Eden. Another thing I don't know why marketers haven't seized upon, but right there, and I'll try to quote as accurately as I can, God provides every Tree that bears fruit. So that's, apples and oranges, avocados, tomato. And then every plant that bears seed. Whole grain, legumes, nuts, beans. And the Adventists actually follow that for the most part. So most of them are vegetarian or vegan, or the longest lived among them are pescatarian, which is vegan plus a little bit of fish. But, I had the good fortune of meeting Dottie Parker here. She's 96 years old and very healthy. Has this enormous garden. I cooked with her for an afternoon. We made these delicious sort of oatmeal cookies with no sugar. They're still good. And I said, I wonder, what's in your refrigerator? Ever wonder what's in the refrigerator of a really healthy 96-year-old? So she pulls it open, and here it is. I thought this was so revealing. There's no setup or anything. There's no fruit boxes, no Coke, no bacon, no yogurt, which is, usually junk food anyway. So it was really illuminating to see this. And Adventists tend to hang out with other Adventists, and we now know that health behaviors are as contagious as a cold. So who we hang out with has a big impact on what we eat and what we do, et cetera. Adventists tend to hang out with other Adventists. Part of it's because, they have the Sabbath, and they're also not big drinkers or smokers. So, but anyway, it's sort of this reinforcing loop. We was having this great conversation last night. Somebody had a party, and we were talking about the power of religion. And, we're getting less religion. But I have to say, for a intervention, a public health intervention, it's really effective to get people doing things that stack the deck in favor of health. Ellsworth Warren went to church every single week. Multi-millionaire, yet he's 98 years old when I met him. When a contractor wanted $6,000 to build a privacy fence, he's like, for that kind of money, I'll build my own fence. And for 3 days, we followed him around in the blistering heat as he poured cement, hauled timbers. Remember, 98 years old. Fourth day, he ends up in the operating room, but that's not Ellsworth getting open heart surgery. That's Ellsworth on the left doing open heart surgery, which he continued to do past his 100th birthday. Ed Rawlings, 106-year-old working cowboy, starts his day with the swim, and on the weekends he puts on the boards. Marge Deton, kind of my girlfriend, kind of my little lover during this whole period, 105 years old, woke up every morning at 6:30 a.m., read her Bible for a half hour, then she had her breakfast, and she's very prescriptive about her breakfast. Slow-cooked oatmeal, not the quick oatmeal, with walnuts, dates, topped with soy milk, followed by what she called a prune juice shooter. Then she'd go down and pump iron, ride her bicycle, and then she'd get in her 1994 Cadillac, where she barreled down the San Bernardino Freeway, volunteering for 6 different organizations, including the Loma Linda Senior Center, where she'd go out on Tuesdays and Thursdays to help out the old folks. So I wrote up these 3 cultures for a story for National Geographic. I worked for about 25 years to get into National Geographic, and finally they took a pitch for me, and it became their 3rd most successful cover story in their history. And it's now led to 7 books. They're all blue zones of one sort or another. But, I try to be really, the secret, National Geographic secret, which I have sort of copied and extended, is we do the best, I believe, the best science reporting anywhere. But rather than just spewing facts and figures, we metabolize the science into a character or an image. And that enables you to deliver the message through the heart and then to the brain. And that's the way to get it to stick. So I did years and years of research before I sat down, before I got on an airplane or met a centenarian. And that seemed to be the secret sauce. And all my books do the same things. I pride myself at being evidence-based at these things. Plus, I made money for the first time. I never made more than $40,000 until I was 40 years old. And mostly because my book sold really well. And I took the money right away and went blew it on more blue zones. We found the 4th blue zone in the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, a place with the lowest rate of middle-age mortality in the world. What's that? Well, roughly it means that in Nicoya, Costa Rica, they have the best chance of reaching a healthy mid-90s. So, you know, everybody in this room, I got good news and bad news for you. Right now, at birth, the life expectancy is 92 for men. For women, it's about 96. And these people do the best job at getting the years their bodies have to offer them. And they do it in an extraordinary way. First of all, I believe they eat the healthiest diet the human species has ever invented. And I bet you even Robert Lustig would agree with me on this one. 3 ingredients: corn, whole grain, artisanal or ancestral grains that are roasted into corn tortillas, squash, and then beans. This is the 3 sisters. It's about a 7,000-year-old diet. When you mix all 3 of them, all the complex carbohydrates you need, niacin, micronutrients, and all the amino acids necessary for human sustenance. In other words, protein. It's got all the protein you need. And it's cheap, it's shelf stable. I hear all the time, you know, my main job, which I'm going to get to here, I get paid by insurance companies to go into cities and reshape the cities to lower the disease load. And most of the time I'm in the inner city, and you hear all the time that we need more fresh fruits and vegetables here. Great idea, but wrong. Why? Fresh fruits and vegetables are expensive, they're not shelf stable, and a lot of times people don't know what to do with them. You give people a grain and a bean, 90% of the time, they not only know what to do with them, they know how to make them taste delicious, so they'll actually eat them. And that's a big lesson we took away from Costa Rica. The other thing, though this is until about 1980, it was more or less an underdeveloped world, every man, woman, and child in that country has the right to this access and a visit from what's called a basic health team. In Spanish, it's EBICE. But essentially, it's a 5-member team, and anybody from the government here might listen to this. So it is 1 doctor, 1 nurse practitioner, 1 record keeper, and 2 mobile health evangelists or health ambassadors like Louisa here. And Louisa's job over the course of a year is to visit 1,250 families. And she goes to every single family, knocks on the door. She has their health record. She has a conversation. A lot of times these people are lonely. And people like Louisa tend to be very friendly. They'll take your blood pressure. They'll look for signs of type 2 diabetes, signs of infectious disease, i.e. Stagnant water in the backyard, which carry diseases like Zika and dengue and malaria. Clean those up. Go into the refrigerator, look for signs of chronic disease. And then they'll catch a disease sometimes 15 years before it shows up in the emergency room as a $100,000 heart attack or a long-term problem like type 2 diabetes. By the way, for every $1 spent on effective prevention, it returns about $18 in saved costs. This is in the United States, and I said effective prevention. But Costa Rica is a great example, because remember, this is not a rich country. They don't have nuclear medicines or fancy x-rays, but they spend 1/15 the amount we do in the United States on health care and have half the rate of middle-age mortality. And by the way, in the Nicoya Peninsula, it's the poorest people who are the healthiest. They have the longest telomeres. So once again, money is not necessarily the answer. It's deploying the money in the right way. And blue zones give us, I think, important lessons to follow. Finally, the last blue zone we found off the coast of Turkey. By the way, there may be 2 more blue zones, very small, but I think blue zones is kind of going away. And I can talk more about that later if we do Q&A. But the last one we found it about 15 years ago, only about 10,000 people, largely isolated because it didn't have any ports. But Ikaria is extraordinary in that they have the purest form of the Mediterranean diet in the world. There's actually a metric that measures strict adherence to the Mediterranean diet. Not only the predictable fruits and vegetables, also very high bean consumption, lentils and garbanzo mostly. But also, I found this interesting, green consumption, about 80 kinds of greens. Not Gucci greens you buy in the grocery stores, but the kind of greens that we weed whack in the backyard or spray glyphosate on in the United States. These old ladies go out and collect them. They can recognize them. They're on the side of the road many times, and they bake them into beautiful pies or steam them and put a lemon and extra virgin olive oil and some herbs on them. They're fantastic. And then 3 types of herbs that are not only used as medicines for different reasons, but because they were poor, they couldn't afford coffee. So when they wanted a warm beverage to perk them up in the morning or put them to sleep at night or to calm their stomach, they had from the left endemic oregano, rosemary, sage, and then a mint tea. And we actually had these sent to the University of Athens School of Pharmacology and found that all these teas are not only powerful antioxidants, they lower inflammation, and they were diuretics, which means they lower blood pressure. And people drink it every day for their entire life. This may explain why Ikarea's life expectancy is about 8 years greater than it is in the United States, and they had no discernible Alzheimer's disease on the island. And we found about 97% of everybody over 65 with a team of scientists and students that deployed the same instrument that our government used to assess dementia. If you want to find the secret to Alzheimer's, I assert we ought to be spending some time in Ikaria. But it's an amazing place with deep lessons. I like to tell the story of this little fellow on the right here. His name is Stamatis Moriaitis. Moved to the United States when he was 20, got a job as a painter, made money, had a family, moved to the suburbs. At 66, 3 doctors told him, you have terminal lung cancer, get your affairs in order. Well, instead of dying in Detroit, he flies back to Ikaria, where he can get buried with his ancestors. And he starts drinking the wine, eating the Ikarean diet, reconnecting with his family. 6 months comes and goes, and he doesn't die. And to make a long story medium, 37 years later, when I met him at 103, he was still alive. And of course, as a journalist, I want to know what his secret was, and I was pretty sure it wasn't his ability to match plaids. And I said, how did you manage to beat lung cancer? And he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know. I guess I just forgot to die. Which sounds flippant. And people ignore things like this all the time, but this was the best answer I heard in 10 years of research and 105 scientists. Why? Because when you go to blue zones, people water skiing at 106 or standing on a head, it's never because they try. You know, in the Western world here, we think, okay, to get healthy, I'm going to get on this program. And like in these blue zones, these 50-year-olds, they never say at age 50, I'm going to get on the longevity diet or join a gym or run down to Central America for stem cells. They don't try to do anything. We in America, we spend billions and billions of dollars pursuing health. In blue zones, it's not pursued. It ensues in every case. So for the most part, when you look at how they're moving, nobody's exercising. And by the way, I would argue since the Eisenhower administration in the United States, exercise has been an unmitigated failure. Fewer than 25% of Americans get only 20 minutes of physical activity a day, despite the billions we spend on it. In blue zones, people are getting the equivalent of 8,000 to 12,000 steps a day without even thinking about it. Every time they go to work, a friend's house, or out to eat, it occasions a walk. They have gardens out back. Their houses aren't full of mechanical conveniences, so they're still doing yard work by hand, grinding corn, kneading bread by hand. All those calories count. They have vocabulary for purpose. They have sacred rituals that de-stress every day. The ancestor veneration in Okinawa, among the Seventh-day Adventists, they pray. The Koreans and the Costa Ricans take a nap, which is actually associated with lower rates of cardiovascular disease. The Sardinians just do happy hour, which I've adopted. When it comes to what they eat, I know this is terribly inconvenient right now, but they all drink, except for the Adventists. They say they don't drink, but about half of Adventists drink. But I just saw a survey in Korea of people 90 years old and older, and over 90% of them have a glass or two of wine every single day, and some have a few more. So can these people live a little bit longer if they drink it all? Maybe. But you can't really separate red wine from the Mediterranean diet and say it's the Mediterranean diet. So unless you want to, modify it on your own. But they're drinking some. Could they live a little bit longer if they didn't drink? Perhaps, but I don't think life would be as great in a blue zone. If you want to know what a 100-year-old ate to live to be 100, you have to know what they've eaten their entire life. We did a meta-analysis. I did it with Walter Willett at Harvard. For you sort of groupies of public health, you might know Walter Willett. But we aggregated 155 dietary surveys. And if you want to know what a 100-year-old actually lived to be 100, 90 to 100% whole plant-based food. Very high carbohydrates for the carbophobes in the audience, 2/3, but both lentil beans and jelly beans are carbohydrates. We're talking the lentil bean end of the spectrum. So whole grains, corn, rice, and wheat, greens and garden vegetables, tubers like sweet potatoes, nuts, and the cornerstone of every longevity diet in the world, beans. We're not very good at making beans in the United States, and for what I've experienced here in London either. But in blue zones, they know how to make the beans taste delicious. And a cup of beans a day is associated with about 4 extra years of life expectancy. So I'd say that's the pillar. They do eat meat, but fewer than 5 times per month. A little bit of fish, less than I thought it was going to be. No cow's dairy in any of the blue zones. A little bit of feta cheese you see. They do eat some sweetener, but it's usually honey. And sweets are kind of a celebratory food. So I just looked it up. In Great Britain, you guys consume the equivalent of 20 teaspoons of added sugars per day. You don't realize it. And I don't know if you guys saw Robert Lustig's great presentation this morning, but he makes the best argument that, why our diet is killing us and why I think this kind of diet will keep us alive. And also when it comes to what they drink, 6 glasses of water, teas of all kind. Good news for most of us, coffee. One of the few indulgences we can enjoy with impunity. And then a little bit of wine, usually with meals and with friends. And by the way, this is infinitely suitable for whatever sort of dietary pattern or culture you are in. This holds true whether you're in Asia or Africa or Europe or Thai but I stand by this. This is about 10 years old, and I haven't changed a bit of it. I haven't emphasized the ultra-processed foods or the absence of ultra-processed foods, but I will after I saw Robert's presentation this morning. We tend to focus a lot on nutrients. I think that misguides people, and what we eat, but how we eat it too. In blue zones, people tend to sit down with their family. They slow down. They express gratitude. You say, big deal. Well, when you express gratitude, you're putting some punctuation between your busy, stressful day, and now we're going to eat. And it lowers cortisol levels, maybe better digestion. And then the foundation on which all of this lies is how they connect. Probably 50% of the longevity formula. They put family first. And I don't mean in the political sense. I mean they keep their aging parents nearby. They invest in their spouses. They tend to stay married or with their partners. And they invest in their children, too. They tend to belong to a faith-based community. Belonging to a faith and showing up 4 times per month is worth somewhere between 4 and 14 extra years of life expectancy over having no faith. And that's especially strong for inner city minorities. Arguably the most cost-effective public health intervention. Get them involved in the faith of their choice. And again, I don't even go to church anymore except on Sunday. I mean on Christmas because my mom expects it. And then the other big kind of insight of this Power 9 is how we connect, who we decide to have in the room with us. We know that if our 3 best friends are obese or overweight, there's about 150% better chance that we'll be overweight ourselves. Smoking is contagious. Alcohol abuse is contagious. Even unhappiness and loneliness are contagious. So being careful about the group of friends you curate to be around you. Making sure that you have 3 friends who care about you on a bad day, whose idea of recreation is pickleball or walking or gardening. Then it's not a bad idea to have a vegan or vegetarian friend because they're going to show you where and how to eat delicious plant-based food. At the end of the day, we can try to guilt people about the environment or animal cruelty, which are all very real, but usually most people use their stomachs to decide what they're going to eat. So deliciousness, I would argue, is the most important thing, and a good vegan or vegetarian is going to show you where to get that delicious plant-based food. People look at this right now and they say it's common sense, but it's actually not common sense. First of all, it wasn't anywhere near common sense 20 years ago when I wrote the book, but most people, it's probably fewer than 90% of people fewer than 10% of people deploy anywhere near these 9 characteristics of longevity. In the United States anyway, of the 4% of our budget we spend on $5 trillion budget, by the way, we spend on diet, supplements, and exercise programs and gyms and so forth. And this is what we've heard forever. And it makes sense. But when you really dig into it, they're very expensive. And when you look at how long they last, it's disappointing. You start with 100 people on the best diets today, you lose 10% in just 3 months, you lose 90% in 7 months, and you lose almost all of them in 2 years. If your financial planner showed you this return curve, you would fire him in a minute. Yet every year, New Year's Eve, start the New Year's resolution. It's going to be different this year, but it's not. Same thing with exercise programs. We start with a lot of zeal, a New Year's resolution, we tend to run out of gas. And even if I come back with the pill guaranteed to reverse longevity, and by the way, there's no pill, there's no supplement, there's no genetic intervention that stops, reverses, or even slows aging. These are the pathways to human biology and longevity. There are so many factors at work at our longevity, it's almost hubris to think that we're going to have one that's going to affect all systems. And even if we did find one, Americans wouldn't take it long enough to make a difference. So if that doesn't work, what does? Very clear advice from the blue zones. People in the blue zones, they're living close to nature. They're growing their own food. They sit down to dinner with their family. They have a spiritual life. They walk to their friend's house or out to eat. There's a common purpose that is usually pervasive through the entire culture. It's an enjoyable recipe for longevity. And for the most part, it's mindless. And all blue zones are eating mostly a whole food plant-based diet. They're moving naturally 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day without thinking about it. Life is underpinned with purpose. Purpose, by the way, is worth about 8 years of life expectancy over being rudderless in life. They surround themselves with the right people, and they live in places where the healthy choice is the easy choice. And the secret to longevity does not lie in any one of these 5 circles. Marketers will try to pull out one of these things and create a product and tell you that's your secret to longevity. And it's false. Where you really have places where people are manifestly living longer, it's the interconnected, mutually supporting nature of this cluster that keeps people doing the right things and avoiding the wrong things so people don't develop a chronic disease. type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, dementia, 40% of cancers or so. That's the secret. Because when it comes to longevity, there's no short-term fix. There's no pill, there's no superfood, there's no diet that you're going to do this week, this month, or this year that has any really bearing on whether or not you're alive and thriving in 2030. You have to think about things you're going to do almost every day for decades or pretty close to a lifetime, like people in blue zones. I'm going to take 10 more minutes because I want to share how we actually manufactured a blue zone. How would you actually manufacture a blue zone in the UK? Well, we tried to do just that in the United States. After my book, I was pretty popular for a hot minute, and I managed to raise some money from AARP and get partnership from the University of Minnesota School of Public Health to manufacture a blue zone. And it was based on the central premise, and it's this. If you try to change people's behavior, you'll fail for almost all people almost all the time. And I defy, other than teeth brushing, I defy anybody to come up with me and show me a behavioral intervention that works for even a large minority of people over time. So our project would assume that the average person is genetically hardwired to crave sugar, crave fat, crave ultra-processed foods, and take rest whenever they can. That's how we survived for most of human history, about 25,000 generations. But we evolved in an environment of scarcity and hardship, and now we live in this environment of overabundance and ease. And we've over-innovated. I don't like to badmouth anybody. I actually don't think the big food companies are necessarily evil. Big food companies are doing what they're supposed to do, make a profit. And if they don't make a profit, the CEO gets fired, the board gets fired. So, the incentives are misaligned. But we took a completely different approach. Instead of spending money on education or health promotion, we decided to engineer people's environment so that the healthy choice was easy. In other words, engineer not their conscious decisions, but their subconscious decisions. And we started out with some research. We found that most Americans spend most of their life within 8 kilometers of their home and work. So that was our focus. We're not trying to boil the ocean here. And then we thought about the environments in which people spend their day. Because again, you need gentle pressure, ubiquitously and relentlessly applied if you actually want, for the long term, if you actually want people to get healthier. So we start with sort of individual domains, their home, and we found aggregated a dossier of research that showed all the things that you can do to engineer physical activity into people's homes and engineer out mindless eating. And there's about 20 of them. I wrote a book called The Blue Zone Challenge. If you want to see them, they're documented there. Our social network, that's another environment. This plan would involve trying to get people kind of to dump their, not dump, but to diminish their unhealthy friends and rebuild their social network with healthier people who eat healthy foods, find their sense of purpose, and put it to work through volunteering. And then during the day, people leave their home and they go buy food, and they go to work, and their kids go to school, and they go to restaurants, and they go to church. So we developed a Blue Zone certification that had about 25 different ways, evidence-based ways to optimize designs and policies in all of these places so that people mindlessly move more, eat more whole plant-based food, socialize more, and live out their purpose. And to get certification, you just had to do about 3/4 of the things and show that you did them a year later. And then the big opportunity here is policy. And Robert Lustig, once again, we're completely aligned on this. The most cost-effective health intervention is to convince our lawmakers to adopt better policies in food, tobacco, built environment, which is how streets are built, and alcohol. So food, Robert Lustig brought up soda tax, sugar-sweetened beverage. And it's a very hard sell. It's in our menu. But there's lots of tricky other ways to engineer out ultra-processed food from people's diet. One way is drive-throughs. I don't know if you have drive-throughs here in the UK, but in America, they're all over the place. You get city council to eliminate the drive-throughs, and it's largely because the other businesses aren't getting as much business because people don't get out of their car. That usually what convinces them, 3% drop in fast food consumption. Billboard advertising. 2 identical neighborhoods. One neighborhood, you eliminate billboard advertising. You get about a 10 to 15% drop in BMI in that neighborhood over the identical neighborhood. So it turns out nobody really misses the billboards except the guy who owns the billboard. So we can often sell that. So if you instead of trying to hit the trying to aim at the target with a silver bullet, we think of silver buckshot. So we come in these cities with menus. They're all evidence-based, and city council, they have to agree to sit down with us, and we go through each of these policies for effectiveness and feasibility in their community. The easiest way to be shown the door is to come in like, I'm the great expert, listen to me. No. All you have to do, don't waste my time. I'll come spend time with you. I won't waste yours. We're going to pick 8 policies from each of these 4 areas. I have a team that's in the city for 3 to 5 years, ideally 5 years, and we help get consensus. And once we got consensus, we're like a terrier on your pant leg until they get passed, implemented, and enforced, these policies. And it works very well, because most of the time, first of all, local government's very easy to change. Federal government, forget it. At least in the United States, it's a swamp. You find a mayor or a city council who wants to work with you, you can get a lot done in just a few years. So we work on the periphery, and it all adds up. So the first blue zone city, we auditioned cities. We didn't come in and try to sell them. We got the great answer for you. We said, nope, we got blue zone certification here for the first city in America to become a manufactured blue zone. We had 5 cities audition, and we picked the city that wanted it the most. The mayor, the superintendent of schools, city council, chamber of commerce, the CEOs, they all had to raise their hands and say, we want to do this. In Albert Lea, Minnesota, they raised their hands the highest. We ended up picking them. The first thing we did with them is we got all the health advocates in one room. We brought in Gallup's well-being index. Remember I said if you can't measure it, you can't manage it? We measured it. We measured the BMI, the stress levels, the well-being, diabetes level, 20 different domains. And then we said to all these different health organizations, if we're successful here, lock arms with us, we all get credit. We're going to measure it at the community level. And they said yes. First thing we did is we worked with the city planners. People were driving, spending most of their time behind their wheels. To get them on their feet, we convinced city council to put in 6 kilometers of sidewalks strategically to connect the parks to the neighborhoods, to connect the neighborhoods to downtown, which was beautiful. They wanted to open up main streets, which you see here is a beautiful, typical American small town where people actually talk to each other. But they wanted to extend the freeway off-ramp, and we convinced them to put that idea on hold. You don't want to tell them they can't do it, but I got it. You can see at the end of the street there, there's a lake. We convinced them to take that road expansion money and create a pathway around the lake, which now gets used 12 months out of the year. I don't have to incent anybody, give them a free t-shirt, hound them to go out. It's easy, it's beautiful, it's fun. They feel good afterwards. They were mowing the lawns of these enormous parks. We convinced them to put in community gardens. And in one night, we rented 4 of them, 4 giant gardens out in just one evening. We offered Blue Zone certification to restaurants that agreed to change the defaults. Instead of automatically getting French fries with your sandwich, or chips, I guess you call it here, you got fruit. You could ask for the fries. Same thing with bread. Bread shows up, people don't even really want it half the time, but if it's sitting there smelling all roasty with the butter, I'll eat that. But it turns out if you change the default, you got to ask for bread, you engineer out 75 calories before people even start eating. In the restaurants, we tagged the healthy food, so it was easy for moms to see. Checkout counter where the temptation is the greatest. We changed all the defaults there to healthy defaults. We didn't take on school lunch, but we changed 8 or so different defaults. The most important one was convincing grade schools and middle schools no eating in classrooms or hallways. BMI drops 11% because you just took all the junk food out of an 8-hour pass. We convinced about 25% of the population to take a longevity test, which is really our measurement, and convince them if they weren't doing the community garden to dig a garden in the backyard. We convinced them to let us put them in MOIs. You know, I don't know here in Great Britain, but in the United States, about 50% of people are feeling lonely. And, you know, as I pointed out, it shaves about 7 years off of life expectancy. We got 500 people to come out, and all we did is challenge them to walk together or eat together for 10 weeks. 5 years later, 60% of them are still together. We organized them around a healthy behavior. We took some time to make sure they shared values and interests and schedules, but a big success. And the other big success that we couldn't have predicted, we gave everybody a free purpose workshop, and then once they understood what their values and what they're good at, we immediately speed dated them with volunteer opportunities so they could put their purpose to work. Doesn't do much good if you have a lot of purpose if you don't have a place to put it. The results were pretty remarkable. These life expectancy tests are reported behaviors, but the reported behavior showed about a 3-year bump in life expectancy. We get a little bit more accurate count here, almost 2 tons of weight collectively shaved off their midsections. But where the rubber hits the road in the United States is money. And when the city itself, this is not us, the city itself reported a 40% drop in healthcare costs. That brought out the national media, you know, our TV shows. And Walter Willett sent a team out from Harvard and wrote this up in Newsweek magazine. It worked not because we hounded 20,000 people to change their behavior or, you know, gave them free T-shirts. We changed their environment. And when you change people's environment, their behavior soon follows. As Winston Churchill, I'm going to demolish this, but I think he essentially said, shape your environment, will shape you. That's certainly what we found in blue zones. From there, big news, we got about 70 other cities asked if we'd come in. We picked Los Angeles because we thought it was the most counterintuitive. Took the exact same approach, helped them redesign their streets, put in about 200 kilometers of more bike lanes in, helped them redesign their streets. Turns out if you want to help people redesign their streets, you show them what it looks like now, and then you show them what it could look like. You don't start talking about policy because people's eyes glaze over, but you bring a neighborhood together and you show them this, we call it a photomorph. It's very easy to get them to vote the way you want them to vote. Nobody walked. Kids didn't walk to school in LA. We asked people why. Turns out parents are afraid their kids or get hit by a car or get snatched. So we created these walking school buses led by adult volunteers. We got about 28% of kids to come out and walk to school. That's free physical activity. It's outdoors. We got vegetables, real vegetables in the curriculum. You'd be shocked how many American kids could not correctly identify a banana as a fruit. We re-engineered their school lunches and put in the healthy food first. Made the healthy food look like junk, and got the city council to make sure that there weren't any new fast food restaurants or convenience stores within 1,000 meters of the school. And then we got smoking ban first in just one neighborhood and then the entire city. Well, you got a ticket if you smoked outside. The results, and this is Gallup, it's third party. In the first 5 years, we saw a smoking drop by 17%. And this is against controls, by the way. The number of overweight people dropped by 15%. Reported stress went down. Physical activity went up by about 9%. And thriving, which is a measure of how satisfied people are with their life and if they think it's going to be better in 5 years, went up. And we didn't start with any of this. But just to wrap up, from LA, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Iowa got us to come to do an entire state. We did the most conservative city in America, Fort Worth, about 1 million people there. BMI dropped by 3% in 5 years, where it went up every place else. And now we're in about 70 American cities. And despite the fact it's very hard to get funding for these things, tell them I'm busy. It's getting traction. Why? Because it actually works. We can hound poor people all day long to eat healthy food, and then they shop in places like this, and what do you expect? It's not until we shift the focus to trying to change behaviors, to trying to change people's environment, setting people up for success, we're not going to see any measurable change. So that's been our focus. The message is, you know, the work you guys are doing, keep doing. It enhances the work I do, but I would submit to you as shifting to people's environment and try to optimize that, making a healthy choice, not only the easy choice, but the avoidable choice, and we'll see you when you're 100. Thank you very much for sticking around. Thank you. Now off to happy hour.